Hi, this is David from EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And I'm not really good with my soundboard, and so I screwed up the intro on the show today. But um, Mike, I want to welcome you to the show today. You've been with us before. Mike, you're an engineer with an engineering firm here in Omaha, and you used to work very close, or you still work very closely with public power groups, things like that. You want to just briefly, for a minute, just give a little bit about your
Yeah,
background?
absolutely. Mike Herzog, thanks for having me back. Appreciate it. Yeah, my background's in electrical engineering in the power sector specifically. Did a lot of planning work with the public utility for a long time. Have done work on my own, gone through there. Do work with some consulting firms on the East Coast in there, and have a lot of background in the grid and planning and experience in electrical engineering, and kind of on the forefront a lot of these topics that have been through, and what it actually means to the grid and how those things kind of work.
Well, I'm happy to have you, and it's interesting 'cause this is a little bit different rather than just covering the regular news. But you and I both see a lot of information that the average person doesn't realize is going on in the green energy space. There's a lot of misconceptions. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit is how, in my mind, in the next 10 years, we're not talking about next week, we're not talking about 2025, but by you know, 2033, 34, we're going to have these things called a personal grid. Now,
Mhm.
give me what you think of a personal grid. How would you define a personal grid?
Yeah, so there's personal grids. There's probably the bigger buzzword around the industry is microgrid. But
Okay.
that's more, you can think of like a college campus, or a bigger area where it's covering separate buildings. It's covering multiple facilities all in the same space. But personal grid, I think a lot of it applies towards residents. A home. It's where
Yeah.
people are at, and it's you have the ability to replicate or duplicate what the bigger grid, what the bulk electric system is providing to your house in that space, and that's
So
through
so micro
generation. Oh,
a
go ahead.
mic so a microgrid might be, say, an apartment complex or a college campus.
Yeah. It's still applicable to even a residence or a home, but it's normally you're involving multiple types of generation, multiple types of storage. It might it's more of it's more space. For lack of a better term, it's connected through the wires, everything like that. Whereas at your own residence, it could be a personal grid. It's still a microgrid at the end of the day, but it's all very much self concentrated and doesn't quite need to be as robust if you were covering let's college campus is what I always go back to, because it's a footprint, it's a space. A lot of them run their own utility operations or utility plants anyway, so it's
Okay.
pretty easy to visualize what that would look like.
So when I think of like a personal
But
grid,
oh,
so
go ahead.
like I have solar. I was gonna say I have solar, and in the next year or so, I'll probably be able to do bidirectional charging. So I'll be able to use my electric car to store the power from my solar instead of selling all of it back to OPPD or to the local utility company, I should say, for those people not from Omaha. And then
Mhm.
at night, my car or my house can run off the power that's on the car batteries. Okay. And then it'll recharge in the mornings. Now, I tend to not leave during the day. So my vehicle would be charged when solar is strong. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily perfect for everyone. And at some points, I see opportunities for even personal wind turbines to go on the roof and different things that are coming along that can provide power to people. Now, this is good for somebody like me who lives in a house. Okay. It's a little different for somebody that's like in an apartment complex, but this is something I
Yeah,
really
for sure.
see coming.
There's
Yeah.
so a couple of points there, a couple of things to consider as you're going through. So, um, one, when you talk about a personal grid and what it looks like, there's two ways you can look at it. There's one that it supplements your connection to the grid, and is able to island a little bit if you lose power, if something happens, if a tree branch falls into a line, a squirrel has a really bad day, whatever it is, and you might normally otherwise be out of power. If you have that storage mechanism, if you have active generation, you can power your home. You can look at a solution like that going through. Um, the way most of the technology works right now, limitations in workspace, the availability of battery storage or other types of storage you might look like, you still need to come back to the grid. There are going to be points when you need to rely off the grid to get that power source. The wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine, your batteries are running low, whatever that might be. So you still have that interconnection and tie back to the grid when it comes through for those really, really critical periods when you would come through. As technologies advance and you start to get larger storage systems, as you start to get more advanced home designs, even considering things of separating your circuit breaker panels. What are the really critical loads you need on your house? If I lost power, I need my refrigerator, I need my freezer, I need climate control. I need those different facets. That's what's really critical. Whereas today, most breakers are set up. It's your entire house, and the kids playing Nintendo and everything like that. It's probably not a critical load at the end of the day. But there's not a good way to segment those things out right now.
No, I
But as all those technologies develop and all kind of come together as one, it facilitates that a lot better.
I've even thought about, I'm not too far from a creek. I've thought about, hey, I
Mhm.
could have a little hydroelectric generation coming off my creek.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the wind question does come up. Like why don't I have a mini wind turbine at my house? Uh, One, it's where utility scale wind gets its advantage is in height. Those turbine blades, if you drive through the Midwest, they're very, very tall. So it's a much more predictable, much more steady wind pattern at that height and altitude above the ground. Whereas on a home, yeah, it may feel windy in your backyard, may feel windy on your roof, but as far as being a completely reliable source or more predictable, it just isn't there yet with what we have. Whereas solar is much more predictable, much more reliable. You have roof space, you have kind of these defined areas, and it's easier to predict and get a more steady output of it.
I,
Wind doesn't hurt anything. I mean, a little micro turbine, don't get me wrong, that would hurt absolutely nothing. That's a good thing, but it's just you're not going to get necessarily the bang for your buck at the 20-foot roof line or wherever that is in your house.
I get that. I get that. Yeah, those turbines, I think it's hard to really tell because they're really a lot farther away when you drive down the interstate than you think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they stick like 600 feet in the air or something like that at the top of the highest blade. It's really
Yep.
crazy because I remember seeing something like, well, you see the blades going down the interstate occasionally on the back of a
Mm-hmm.
truck, and it's like they're way longer than no, than a normal truck. It may not be 600 feet, but it's
It's
three,
kind of funny.
400 feet
That's
anyways.
actually one of the limitations on size of turbines today is the ability to transport those blades and make turns and actually get them cross country from where they're manufactured to where they need to go. It's the length of them is a lot of it is determined by how you're actually able to transport them cross country and get them to the middle of the country from where they're imported or constructed.
Well, I'd imagine hooking them up is a pretty big deal too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're good. It's a process, but if you've ever had a chance to see it or go, I mean they know what they're doing and they can move through. The other thing you mentioned a little bit ago, talking about an apartment dweller, or
Right.
even let's say a renter, somebody who might not have that decision making power to make those modifications to their residence to incorporate something like that. Um, the ability where you get advantage out of a personal grid or a microgrid, a lot of it's from resiliency. Hey, if the lights go out, I know I can keep my critical loads on. I know I can keep the lights on and do all. So you might not have that option, but if your interest is more in the hey, I want to be able to integrate renewables into my house. I want solar, I want wind, or whatever that is. That's one of those models that utilities have started to put out in a lot of areas. They call like a community solar or project like that, where it's you sell shares, they sell output, they sell whatever that might be. So people in an apartment have the opportunity to take advantage of that and participate in renewables on the grid. Where it's hey, we're going to go put a big solar farm, out where it's conducive to do so. Land is available, it connects to the grid fine. We're going to do that, but we're going in with the model of we will, effectively we will sell you a panel output of this, and it'll be a rider on your bill. It'll be a surcharge. It'll be something like that where you're actually helping to support in that area. So from the renewable aspect, there are channels that people are starting to put out there, but until somebody bites the bullet or says, hey, we are going to put a microgrid on our apartment complex, or an area like that, it's really not too available for you at the
It's a
large
bit of a
scale. Now you
challenge.
have like
Yeah.
UPS that's been around for uninterruptible power supplies have been around since the 90s and 80s. It's a big old battery you used to plug your computer into. So if you
And
got
they
a blink,
weigh a
or if
ton.
the
Holy crap,
yes,
they're heavy.
they were bricks, that you would put down. So you do have options like that. It's interesting, a lot of the tool manufacturers, portable tools with the 18-volt batteries or 40-volt battery packs, they actually have little inverters now, that you can. I have one at my house. It's great. The kids like it. You can put it in the tent backyard, and have a power source out there for whatever it is. But you're using the batteries that are associated with your tool brand or whatever it is, and you're creating a tiny little generator. Now, is that going to ride you through an ice storm where you lost power for a couple of days or this? Well, no, it's not intended for that. But can you run a lamp off of it? Absolutely. Could you charge a laptop off of it in a situation? Absolutely.
Well, I think the bidirectional charging is going to fix some of that, especially when you start getting vehicles like, say, a 100 kilowatt battery that's in like a Tesla long range, or some of the SUVs that are coming to the market,
Yes.
because these batteries are going to become more cost effective. The cost of batteries has come down dramatically in the 10
Mhm.
years that we've seen EVs coming to market, and it's going to keep dropping. I've seen estimates that battery costs may drop by 80% again. I don't know if that's really
Wow.
true or not.
Yeah.
Okay, but I've seen some estimates in that regard. So you're definitely going to see the batteries become a cheaper thing. But the one thing is, on 100 kilowatts battery, even if you had, well, you're still going to recharge during the day. So you're really, if you had your car there, even if you'd had a storm, you're never going to really run out of power, because you're going to keep recharging during the day with your solar. Now, I've
Mhm.
seen arguments, like if you had an ice storm and there was ice all over all your solar panels.
Yeah.
I don't know how that really happens, because for starters, the solar is a little warmer to start with.
Yeah.
So you'd think that, the ice would melt off of it fairly quickly. But I
Yeah,
don't
I
know. I
mean,
don't
there's
know how.
there's there's hail events. There's other things like that. There's critical weather that can impact that. But the vehicle to grid connection, which you're talking about, it's going to become more prevalent, as people start to design for it, as people start to incorporate it into planning, and I think as more people start to actually drive electric vehicles and start to experience in that space, the comfort level with saying I'm going to actively drain my vehicle, that I rely on to support my home, to support the grid, to do whatever is that particular function with it. People are going to become more comfortable with it. I've
They
had an
will.
EV for 4 or 5 months now, and when I got it, it's like, boy, I'm going to have to charge this every night. I'm going to have to do all of these things. I need to be aware of it. Um, I charge it a couple of times a week, and everybody's situation is different and how they use their vehicles. It's like, but for the everyday driving use that most people use, you come in, boy, every night with almost a full tank, and in theory, you could run that thing. You could draw power off of it. You could support the grid and still be ready in the morning for the next day and have 75% full tank or a 50% full tank. And you're going to be able to get what you need to do for that day, what you need to do for the next day, and every day after that. So I think it's still comfort level with people of understanding, like, there's a lot of juice in those cars. And how much do you actually drive every day, and how much do you need to drive every day?
I've had developers that are building in Florida that do condos and townhomes, and I've actually introduced them to other people I've interviewed on this show that make are in the process of making bidirectional chargers that they want to
Mhm.
implement in their properties. And these builders, they're incorporating in the condo projects, they're incorporating solar, SIPs, which are super insulated panels,
Mhm.
and a lot of other technologies where they get rebates and different things for building green. They're putting in charging stations for electric vehicles. So they're going to do the bidirectional chargers when those become available. Currently, they're still doing the current technology, but the bidirectionals will be out next year.
Yep.
Okay, so we're not talking that far off. And
No.
so these houses will have no electric bills effectively, or these
Yep.
condos and townhomes will have no electric bills. They're able to use an air conditioning system because of how well insulated the properties are. That's about half the normal size for their property because of how well insulated they are. And people are going to be able to charge their electric vehicles at home with the solar. They're not really going to be paying anything to fuel their vehicle. So, I mean, it's some pretty unique things that I see coming that the average person just doesn't realize yet. Because I see so many arguments politically that, the grid can't handle all of this, and there's some truth to that. You and I have discussed
Mm-hmm.
this on a previous episode that there's lots of energy out there that hasn't been connected to the grid for whether it be bureaucratic reasons or maybe the grid can't handle it because it's always the power's been going one direction. Now it's going to be going two, and so there's a lot of changes, but I really see that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things that people don't really understand, that these things are happening a lot faster than they believe are happening.
It's
So
yeah, it's on the horizon. I mean, it is. These technologies are coming, they're happening. Utilities are planning for them. As you mentioned, developers are planning for them, and starting to incorporate this from day one. And it's so much easier to do that if it's part of your building plan than to retrofit, as you're going
right.
through. So as those changes start to come through, that's a fantastic thing. Yeah, it's the vehicle to grid. Like electric vehicles are scary for utilities, but they're also this amazing opportunity. Just because of habits, like we've talked about. It's utility grids peak between 4 and 6 o'clock on hot sunny days when ACs are running, and some people are still at work and some people are still at home. And when you came home, you started the oven and the dryer and turned on all the lights and cranked down the AC because your house is hot and all of those things. Well, if you're an EV owner, the thought is, well, you plug your car in when you get home. You're done for the day. I'm home. This is where it is. And it's scary for utility because it's already the most stressed time, and just from habits of people, it's when they're likely to plug in their AVs and just exacerbate that stress. It's
So one of the
exciting.
other Well, I was going to tell you,
Good.
one of the other people I interviewed, that he has a energy management system that hooks into your fuse box. It's inexpensive. It's only about $200, but you have to pay an electrician to come out and hook it up,
Mhm,
obviously, since
mhm.
it's your electric box. Anyways, it will make it so that your EV by an app would only charge in off-peak times,
Yep,
and it would cool down your house, like say before 4 p.m., so that your house is like say 4 degrees cooler than normal in the summer at 4 p.m.,
yep,
so that it's not running during the peak
yep. You just
process.
ride through that pre cooling period. Yep.
Now, in our part of the country, I'm not aware of there being any like extra cost at certain times of the day, but like California has. But in
Yep.
certain parts of the country, it's more expensive to use electricity from 4 p.m. to midnight. And their system greatly helps with that because then it cuts down in that
Oh,
regard. I mean, obviously,
absolutely.
it would help here too, but there's no economic benefit for the user at this
Yeah,
point.
exactly. So yeah, in a lot of areas, it's time of use rates. So a lot of people have integrated time of use rates into that and send messages to customers. A lot of utilities don't have time of use rates yet, going in there. But the opportunity of electric vehicles in that same scenario is you also have a battery plugged into your grid, at the most peak time. So if you can coordinate that and you can get it to work, it's, hey, I plugged my car in anyway, and you can tell that EV owner, I'm going to use your battery for 2 hours, and whatever the system is to set it up, we won't drain it. You'll still have X amount of miles. We won't put it below a certain line. You plug it in when you get home at 5 o'clock. Let us use it for 2 hours if we need to, and we guarantee you by the morning it's still going to be charged. You're going to see that charge. It's the daily habit piece. It's where we don't drive that many miles during the day. You have these big old batteries sitting there, and you can create that situation with the proper tools, the proper planning, where you have a fleet of batteries plugged into your grid when you need them the most, and then you can charge them at 2 in the morning, or 3 in the morning when things have cooled off and the grid is not as stressed. And to the EV owner, whoever it is, they will never know the difference. I plugged my car in when I got home. When I woke up, it was charged. What happened in between, doesn't matter. it did what I needed to do, and now it's charged when I woke up.
Well, Mike, I know you're pressed for time, and I
Mhm.
appreciate you coming on today. And Mike's going to be with us regularly on Wednesdays.
Yep. I'm gonna
Correct.
definitely
So,
try to. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite again. I love
mhm.
talking about this stuff. It's fun. It's getting my engineering blood flowing, and it's a good topic. And I appreciate the invite and chatting with you.